Hi, this is Ray Anderson. Welcome to another episode of the Three Consulting Amigos. Today we're going to be talking specifically about how you should hire a CPA. And I think one of the challenges that we've seen in small businesses is, how do we make these decisions when many of the small businesses that I work with, and myself included, are sometimes so preoccupied that we really find it difficult to get the answers to some of these challenges. So this is going to be led principally by Ed, who already is a CPA. But the fun part about this is Ed also has an enormous amount of experience in terms of operations. So he brings both sides. He understands what this is all about. And then Ron, of course, has not only done cash flow analysis in his own businesses, but the truth is that working together, we've been able to come up with some ideas that I think can help an organization make better decisions and make them more quickly because they have access to information that they can trust and they can count on. So having said that, Ed, I'm gonna throw the mic over to you, so to speak, and give us kind of an overview of your experience and what it takes to find and to hold on to a good CPA.
Well, I think this is a great topic because I think the term CPA means a lot of different things to many people. And it's like a doctor, a physician. There's all kinds of specialties in this field. So when you find one CPA and you're dealing with a particular issue, it doesn't mean that that person's qualified to help you on other issues. So I'll kind of start with when you start a business, the first CPA you're probably going to run into is someone who's going to do your income taxes. Because you come in with your shoebox of receipts and everything, and you're trying to prepare a tax return that you can send into the federal government. And that may be your first encounter with a CPA. As your business develops and you become a real business and it's professional and you need to do things in accordance with rules and regulations, and you have to report financial information to determine how well you're doing, you normally transcend into a controller type. A controller type doesn't have to be a CPA, but a controller has an accounting degree and knows how to close the books. And one of the things that's a real problem in small businesses is getting financial information in a timely manner so that the owners and the CEO can make decisions that are relevant to the company. So
Can I make an observation at this point, Ed, because I think it's relevant to our conversation. Considering that we may have hopefully a lot of small businesses who are struggling with why get a CPA. Yesterday as we were talking to that banker, Edgar, he said that 9 out of the 10 companies he goes into to obtain financial information don't have anything that's even closely aligned or even a little bit aligned with what bankers need. Now, is that something that you would get from a CPA, or is that something, how would you suggest they move forward?
That's the controller position. What type of CPA you get is determined by what you're trying to do. So a CPA is a certification process. A controller doesn't have to be a CPA, but they have to be a finance expert with an accounting degree. So you need someone like that to close your books so you can determine how well you're doing. Eventually, as your company progresses and becomes more and more of a business and making more money, your banker, because you're going to have significant line of credit, will require some type of a certification of your financial statements from an outside party. These are also called CPAs. They do the attest function, which means they go into a company and they say, okay, your revenue and expenses are properly stated, with the related footnotes that explain a little bit how the accounting process goes. So that's another CPA. And then finally, the last category of CPA are CPAs that have been involved with the CEO in running a business. And they are normally called CFOs, Chief Financial Officers, and treasurers. And their role in a company is much broader. They help the CEO run the company and make the company more profitable. They they develop relationships with banks, lines of credit, financing operations. They get involved with forecasting and making sure that you're hitting your margins. And it goes on and on and on, how valuable this position is. So if you're looking for a CFO, and many people should be, rather than an outside CPA who doesn't have that experience, you need to be looking in a different group of people, different group of CPAs to find that talent. And they're out there and they have significant experience in running businesses.
Ron, it might be appropriate at this point for you to give us some insights from your experience, but one of the challenges, it's going on in my mind, and I'm looking at the small business, and he's thinking, he knows what he has to pay his legal person. Every time he picks up the phone, it's 15 minutes, and that's going to cost him $75. Part of the challenge they have is that, well, how do I afford somebody like this? How am I going to be able to run my business if I have to pay these expensive fees to these people?
Well, I think that's the wrong question to ask. The question really is, how can you not afford to have some of these people? Now, it doesn't mean that you have to pick up the phone a lot and you have to spend a lot of money every time you call. But you do need to have expert advice at some level. And typically, a small business would have a CPA and an attorney. You might not talk to your attorney, but every 5 or 6 years when you have an issue. So why not have a relationship with an attorney? On a CPA, you're probably going to have a quarterly relationship with the CPA, and perhaps monthly. That would probably be a little bit better. But it depends on really how adept you are at putting your numbers together. When I started out in business, things were quite different. Literally, you would take handwritten receipts and put them in boxes and total them all up and take them to the bookkeeper and put them together. Lots changed, but I've hired 6 or 7 CPAs over the years, and have worked with, I have no idea how many, dozens and dozens of CPAs that were my clients' CPAs. And then in addition to that, I've actually worked for 7 large CPA firms throughout the Inland Empire, as well as in Colorado. And I've been inside those operations, helping consulting to them as a consultant, trying to help them grow their own businesses. And so I've really seen CPAs from a wide swath, from a wide perspective. Now, at the same time, having been in business many times and completed business school, I thought there was a certain way to do things. I think you go to business school, you learn you need to have accounting and you need to have good financial records, et cetera. And so clearly, in order to pay your taxes, you need to have some financial accounting. What I didn't learn about business until I was out of business and talking to out of business school and then talking to other pretty sharp people, is that, there are 3, 4, sometimes even 5 kinds of accounting. Well, financial accounting, for instance, happens to be one kind, and that's the kind that is utilized to build financial statements and to pay taxes. But management accounting is another kind of accounting, and that is to put together reports that help managers manage their business. And then there are several other kinds of accountings, forensic accounting, et cetera. Some of them are completely different methods. One of them happens to be retail accounting, retail method of accounting. And so you have to have a specialist, as Ed was saying. If you're a retailer, the chances that your CPA knows retail accounting and will give you a financial statement based on the retail method of accounting is about 4 or 5%, because they just don't know how to do it. It is something that is totally different. And so there is a wide variety of accounting. Now, that doesn't mean that you should stall your decision because you have to figure out exactly the right thing. You know, you need to have an accountant. Just recognize that you're not married. You can fire them, you can rehire them, you can find somebody new, you can talk to other people, but you need to learn and understand what it is you need. The overriding issue that I would say as a businessman and a consultant is you can't do anything if you can't measure performance. And
I would agree with that. I think, what do they say? If you can't measure it, you can't manage it.
that's right.
You know, so having said that, Ron, you know, I'd like to go back to Ed again. I think what you've hit upon is that I'm out here as a overwhelmed employee, and you said get a CPA, and now you've just introduced me to 5 other things I need to be thinking about in addition to that. Is it the right CPA? Does he know my stuff? Help us, and Ed, help our listeners to get a better understanding is how can we simplify the process of finding the right guy for them, for their situation?
Well, I think it starts with what they already have. So they usually have a CPA that's knowledgeable of taxes, that prepares their tax return. And so that's one CPA they have. And they also have a CPA or highly trained financial person to do their books, close their books so that they know how well they're doing. What they don't have is someone who can help them grow the business. And going to the income tax CPA, he doesn't have the skills to do that type of work. And controllers normally for closing the books are excellent, but for managing risk in the company and trying to figure out new ways of making money and looking at mergers and acquisitions, they're not trained to do that. So you, just like doctors, you got to pick the right CPA for what you're trying to accomplish. It's not a generic certification. They all have different skill sets, and you want to pick the right skill set that you need to optimize your business. Simple as that.
Well, I appreciate. I think the question I'm asking that's a little deeper than that, and I think Ron kind of alluded to it. You know, yes, you can get your taxes done, but can you really do effective cost accounting? What advice would we give these guys to make better decisions, to understand kind of a little blueprint to say, okay, if you're looking for somebody, how would you go about finding that quote needle in a haystack? Because we're identifying this is a pretty complicated process to be able to find the right CPA for your particular situation.
I guess the best way to find the right person is to look at their resume and see what type of work they have done and what they have accomplished. And if you look at the tax guy, he's going to have a lot of good tax experience.
Mm-hmm.
He's probably not going to have any experience in running a business. So it's based upon qualifications and finding the right CPA for that company to optimize results.
What would you suggest, Ron, from your experience? How can, you know, again, how could that guy find that better needle in a haystack? You know, how would you advise him to look for the right kind of a person or right kind of a CPA to help him get through?
Well, I think the first thing that I have recommended, and I've done this several times with clients over the years, because the old CPA was not getting the job done. And the first thing is to go to your client or ask the owner to find other businesses in their industry and simply ask if they're pleased with their CPA. How are you doing? Are your taxes on time? Do you get your financial statements in a timely fashion? Are they able to adequately explain questions about where this came from, where that came from? Can they adequately explain to you, the business person, how the balance sheet interfaces with the income statement? That is sort of a complicated dance where they only touch each other in a couple of different places. And so, one is about your assets and the other is about, did you make any money? Um, and at the same time, I mean, they have to be able to carefully explain to you the difference between cash and accrual accounting. So those are two methods that are used that have different benefits and issues in each case. So you need to understand what is the best for you for your taxes, and most CPAs are excellent at that. They're primarily, and most most firms, I would say, Ed, you can weigh in on this. Most firms probably get 60% of their revenue from doing taxes if you count the preparation of financial statements as the road to paying taxes. And some of them are 80 or 90%, I would imagine. Does that sound about reasonable, Ed?
Yeah, it does. But there's been a change over the last 10 years. 20 years ago, you went to this so-called CPA shop to get your financial statements, to get your tax return, etc. That's changed because they used to provide financial statements on a quarterly basis or once a year. You can't run a company that way. So what companies have done, they moved that expertise into the company. So they have somebody under their direction, normally a controller, who prepares the financial statements and understands the difference between GAAP, accrual accounting, and all that good stuff, but it's giving the owner the information that they need to run the company. So that's a big change. And so the use of a CPA has diminished using a CPA office because you're doing the work inside. And the only time you really need this outside CPA to come in is to certify your statements, which you can't do internally.
Right. Given that, the thing is, we probably have a broad range of people who are listening to us. My suspicion is that the smaller they are, the more inclined they're to be a listener, because they're looking for some guidance as to what to do and how to move forward. And this notion of a CPA, as you guys have explained, is a lot deeper than they may have thought. They're thinking, hey, gets my taxes done, that's all well and good. And what we're saying is that no, a good CPA is going to help you grow your business simply by enabling you to move forward. And one of the things that we've had conversations about in the past is a CPA's objective is to reduce your taxes, which in some ways says reduces your income. Well, now we're going to the bank, right? And we're asking the bank to say, look, we'd like some money. And the banker is saying, well, you haven't made any money. So how do you deal with that conundrum, so to speak? Because you on one hand, you're trying to reduce your taxes with your CPA. On the other hand, you're trying to get money from your bank, and that creates a problem.
Well, you have, in those types of situations, and including valuations, when you're trying to value your company, you have to make adjustments to your tax returns. You don't use tax returns. You gotta present the information based upon what your true cash flow is in the future. So therefore, utilizing tax returns is meaningless. You got to restate the information because on a tax return, you're trying one goal, and that's to minimize expense, minimize income, so you don't have to pay income tax. When you look at the valuation of a company, you want to know what the true cash value that you're bringing in every year.
Yeah.
But there's got to be cooperation between the CPAs, and I'll bring up a great example of this. There's a research and development tax credit that's available to manufacturers. Most CPA practices have no clue how to do it, and won't even advise their clients to take a look at it. So I have done this several times. I have gone into the company and said, listen, this is an opportunity for you. I can't provide this service because I don't have the expertise. Your CPA that you're using now doesn't have the expertise, but this company here is a specialized CPA practice, and that's all they do. And that had a tremendous impact on the bottom line. Why the traditional CPA firm never brought it up is beyond me. I guess they don't do the work, so they don't get any revenue for it. So maybe they don't advise their client accordingly. But a good CPA identifies opportunities for the client so that they can monetize those opportunities and optimize their business. And it doesn't mean that that person who's making the recommendations doing the work, he might be connecting you to the right expertise. Again, if you got a problem with your foot, you don't go to a doctor that deals with ears. And that's the same thing that's going on in the CPA profession. Unfortunately, most small business owners classified CPAs as one breed, one expertise, and you pick from this ABC A company or ABC B company. You make that selection and you think everything's going to be taken care of, but that's not the case.
Well,
Yeah, I agree with that, and it might be appropriate to kind of mention that that companies go through phases where they need different things, and of course they're different sizes. If you have a very small company, maybe just you and you've got a part-time helper or something, if you clearly want to have a tax professional. If your revenue is, say, give you a nice salary, a higher salary, you want to have professional help there. The last thing you want to do is make a mistake and have to start dealing with the IRS. In our program the other day, I mentioned that I had a couple of cases, one friend and one client who even though they're pretty sophisticated, managed to get into trouble with the IRS, and they made their lives absolutely miserable for an entire decade. In each case, it's a nasty, nasty situation. So, for your own protection, you need to have a really good tax professional who knows the intricacies of your business well enough to know if you're doing something that maybe you shouldn't do, like you've got a long-term loan to yourself that you haven't paid any interest on and you haven't paid any principal on, and after a certain number of years the IRS says, wait a minute, that's not a loan anymore because you haven't serviced it. And you can speak to the legalities of all of that and stuff, if you feel like it. But I think that it's important to also know that as businesses grow, they need to ratchet up their professional expertise so that your taxes are handled. You hire 3 or 4 more people. You've got to make sure your payroll is working well. Maybe you hire a payroll firm to do that. Maybe your CPA will do that for you. But boy, it's important to get those taxes right. And you want your CPA or his office to be looking at that to make sure you've got your withholdings done correctly. And then you get into a little broader stuff. Manufacturers need to have somebody who understands manufacturing. Retailers need to have optimally, they need to have CPAs that understand the retail business or the fashion business. You look a little harder to get those specialties. Then when you get even bigger and you're doing $10 million a year, you've got a big enough budget to bring in specialists to assist your CPA in doing things that are important. And maybe it would be somebody can help you figure out how to get a bank loan. Maybe it's somebody who understands this management side of reporting a little bit better. That's going to help you do a wide variety of things. I mean, the amount of reporting in manufacturing is, I'm just going to throw out a number, it's maybe 3 times more than in, say, the retail business. So you just need a lot more reports and those kind of reports. Good manufacturing-oriented CPAs, at least they may not be building them for you. They may help you build those reports, but at least they can say to you, gee, it looks to me like your cost of goods sold is a little bit high. How are you doing that? How are you calculating that? What goes into that particular number? And then they begin to query that. Well, what is that? And how does it work? And all CPAs should be open enough to be able to say, gee, I think you need to be looking into this a little bit more. And I think that's why there's a lot more consultative help today than there used to be, partially because of technology and having your own systems in house and that sort of thing. But that needs to be. So I just wanted to say, as you grow, you need more expertise, and don't be afraid to go out and find it.
Or another way to put it.
Before you go ahead, Ed, I want to kind of paint a picture here. As I said, we've worked together, and I had the privilege of working with Ed and understanding what Ron just said. We're working with a client that was seriously doing well, in the $5 to $10 million range. But I think what Ron's alluding to and what Ed did is that for the price, less than the price of an employee that you would get at minimum wage, for 1 day a month, Ed was able to come in and identify the holes and the gaps in the way they were doing business that over the period of about 2 years increased their net profit by 8 times. That can't happen if you don't have that level of expertise. And I think part of what I'd like Ed to address here, and what Ron's saying, is that when you get people who know what's going on, it really transforms your business in ways that you had not expected. So go Ed, respond to that if you would, before I go any further.
Oh yeah, that's exactly, I think what I said at the beginning of this session, and that is you got to have the right expertise to get the job done. Ron just brought up another good point. As you get bigger, you need more of that in your company rather than relying upon somebody who's located 20 miles away, who doesn't understand your company as well, and who isn't focusing their time on your company. So there are opportunities are out there that you can optimize your company, but a normal CPA practice doesn't focus on that. You have to find somebody who's got CFO experience. That's all they have done for a company, is to minimize its risk, to put in financial systems, to optimize with the help of guys like Ron, top line revenue. Because normally CPAs don't want to spend any money. Sometimes you spend money to make money, right, and you got to be able to justify those expenditures. That's where a CFO type of CPA is extremely valuable to the growth of a company, and helping coach the CEO on ways to move the company forward. It's sort of like a team, a CEO and a CFO. They team up and they run the company, and they focus on 2 different things. Unfortunately, smaller companies, normally the CEO, the owner, is the CFO, the CEO, the IT director, is everything. But if you can figure out a way to bring in these expertise, right, without having a full-time employee, and you pay as you go based upon the results that you get, and any good consultant pays himself back to the company probably 5 times. It's a great strategy, and it'll identify holes in what you are doing. And you may get feedback on your CPA that maybe they're not doing everything right that they should be doing. So if I went to you and I said your CPA could have been bringing in $1 million of reduced income tax over the last 5 years, and he hasn't done it, I would think you'd want to look for a new CPA.
And maybe a gun, no. But yeah, that what I was saying here, and I think what we're trying to say is that I think there are two myths that we're dealing with in terms of consultants. One is they're gonna steal me blind, and the other one is I could get this stuff internally. And the point I was trying to make with both of you, because I've had the pleasure of working with you, the bottom line is that a company may not be able to afford a full-time marketing person. They may not be able to afford a CFO inside the organization. But I've seen both of you go in and help transform the fundamentals of a business on a part-time basis that wasn't any more expensive than by them hiring a minimum wage person. And to me, it's kind of like, it's a no-brainer, but how do we demonstrate that to these guys out here who either have fear or don't understand the benefits of a good CPA, as an example?
Well, here's one of the problems we have, Ray. CPA practice is charged by the hour. So everything, and they get evaluated how many hours of billable time. So you call them and they spend a half an hour on something. That's an expense. So most business owners, they don't want to be tied to that type of a deal.
Right.
I think a better approach is bring people in to talk to them, find out, share your financial information with them. And then within a day or so, they can give you a report of some potential opportunities that will open your mind and help educate you on opportunities that you're not taking advantage of, and help you evaluate the services that you're getting from your traditional CPA. How many missed income tax deductions have been made over the last couple of years because there's nobody looking at it? So I think it's really healthy to have a double check, and then once you take a look at the report and you see any value in it, then you talk about how you can get somebody involved in your operation to help you. And there's a lot of these people around, I'll tell you, and they're really good. They had to demonstrate so much value to their company in dealing with bankers, insurance companies, owners, help educating the owner, reading financial statements, doing forecasting, doing management reporting, IT strategies, holding managers accountable. That's usually done by a CFO/CPA.
Can a part-time person play that role? Is it possible for a small business to be able to hire someone like an Ed to be able to come in and make those calls on a part-time basis?
Absolutely. And there's a lot of people out there that do this type of work. And I'll tell you what, they're very good. But if you hire the wrong CPA with the wrong experience, you're not going to realize the value. It's like what Ron said. I don't deal with taxes. If I dealt with taxes 24/7, I could be a tax expert. If you don't deal with taxes 24/7, you're not an expert. If you need help on your taxes, you don't hire Ed. You hire someone down the street that specializes in taxes. And I can normally help people find those type of people that can really help them. Again, it's all about the benefit to the business owner and CEO. It's not about what's best for me. It's trying to find the right services for them to help them grow their business.
That kind of leads us to where, what can we do as a kind of a resource to be able to help identify the best candidates for them to be able to hire? Is that something that you think the marketplace would benefit from, or something that could help them? Because I think, as I look at internally at a small business, the challenge that I see for them is who to trust, who to know, who to go to. And basically, they always go to Fred down the street, who is another guy who has a business like theirs, and use the same CPA or whatever he's used. So,
Well,
Ron,
I think
you want to add something?
yeah, that's an okay strategy. As I mentioned before, it's like you get started, with, Fred's guy that he likes, and that's fine. But there's a lot to be said for bringing in outside people to just do an evaluation. I don't think small businesses do this nearly enough. And by that, you could hire a CPA to do nothing but come in and go through and take a look at the way your accounting is organized, and determine, how the numbers are flowing through the business and if you're capturing everything appropriately, and just say, give me an evaluation of where we are and what we're doing, and it's over. And then, you take that information and you keep that, you talk to your bookkeeper, you take it to your CPA, You have just open conversations about that. And I think that kind of thing should be done a lot more by small businesses where, maybe you can afford $1,200 to have somebody come in and do that. And then you can have a marketing person come in and do a full evaluation of what you're doing and whether or not you're fulfilling, your market is appropriate for what you're doing. And maybe take a look at your social media campaigns and that sort of thing. Now it's a little bit more, a CPA comes in, they are so much of a like mind, you're going to get kind of a consistent product, I would say. You start bringing in marketing people and you're going to have all kinds of weird stuff. So you want to take that with a appropriate grain of salt there. But there are also business efficiency experts who work in most industries who can simply come in and say, okay, because I'm in a lot of different businesses like yours, they may not be any smarter than the owner, but the owner doesn't have an opportunity to get inside his competitors or his like businesses. And even though they may talk to each other, there are no two greater liars at a cocktail party than two people in the same industry. So don't rely on them, but rely on people who are in those businesses all the time. And of course, you can get a lot of that information through reps and so forth. You don't want to compromise people by getting information that is not appropriate. But by having someone come in who is noteworthy and experienced, and who really has literally time and breadth of experience in that particular thing, just get an evaluation. Have somebody say to you, gee, I noticed that your insurance bill is really low. Why is that? Well, maybe you don't have enough insurance.
Right.
Figure that out.
Or it's very high. Why are you paying this?
Yeah, it can be the opposite as well.
Right.
So those kinds of things are really important. And so, consultants who are in a broad range of businesses can add a lot. Now, sometimes they don't do you any good, but you spend $1,000, $2,000, you haven't killed your business, and you now know everything they know because they're going to give you the best that they can do. And that is knowledge that the business owner has gained. And sometimes it doesn't mean much. And sometimes you discovered a simple thing
Right.
can change your business substantially. And there are times when there are a bunch of things that you discover that you're not doing the right way and you ought to change it. Now, having said that, and not to get too far off the subject here of really discussing CPAs, part of what CPAs do is to help you execute certain things. The big problem that I've witnessed in 37 years of consulting to small business is that they can't get the job done themselves. Why? They're already working as hard as they can, and they don't have more money for payroll, et cetera. And so they don't have people who can jump in and do a task. If you need to have somebody figure out how to implement a brand new inventory system, chances are that your bookkeeper is not an expert at doing inventory. They may be, but they may not. And that can be a big deal, especially in retail. You need, having worked in the retail industry, both a consultant and as an owner for 20 some years, I can tell you that you need a retail expert to come in and take a look at your business. You do not want anybody else to tell you how to do an inventory system, because that is a different animal. And there are several companies around the country that specialize in just that.
And what I was going to do to add to what you're saying, Ron, the hard part for a lot of small business, they're more concerned with something costs instead of thinking about what it pays. And I think part of what you and Ed are both saying, to hire somebody to come in who can evaluate your business over a period of a day or two, even if it's $1,200, is a pittance compared to the advantages it might give you as you move down the road. And Ed, I'd like you to talk a little bit about that, because I've seen you've been able to do that, in which you've been able to come in and look at an organization, and without spending a tremendous amount of time, give them incredible insights as to how they can manage their business more effectively.
A CFO, CPA type has to be looking around the corner, trying to identify what the problems are in the operation. Sometimes people at the company don't pick up on these things. For instance, let's say you're looking at your margin, your gross profit margin, and your gross profit margin goes down by 5%. That's a big deal. How many people in the company are going to figure that out? How many people are going to see that as a problem? A lot of times, no one is going to see it as a problem until it's too late, until they find out their black ink turned red overnight. But nobody was looking around the corner to determine what is causing the deterioration of the business. So that's one thing that's really important. But another thing is planning for the future. So if you have a successful business and it's owned by a couple people, you have a couple shareholders that are both instrumental in running the business, and they both own 50% of the company, and then one of them passes away unexpectedly, and then we're at a situation where the guy left can't run the company. And that, I've seen situations there that have been horrific and almost brought the company to its knees and out of business. And that's something you normally wouldn't ever spend any time on unless you have some experience in looking at these things. So, you know, I would look at a buy-sell. If you don't have a buy-sell agreement and you run a company with somebody else and you own it with somebody else, you better take a look at it, because that could be a big deal to your family down the road if something unexpected happens. And remember, something unexpected always happens.
Well, and I think that's the point you're making here, is that while what we're seeing nationally today is globally hurting us, there are black swans in everybody's life. Like you said, a partner who dies, and suddenly you're now a partner with his wife who doesn't know anything about the business, or vice versa. So, you know, and what I'm hearing from you, Ed, is that basically these are things that a good person who understands your business, as Ron said, you know, if you're in retail, find somebody who knows retail, can probably come in and do within a matter of a day or two and give you some insights that nobody else has the experience or the capacity to do. Is that a fair assessment for both of you?
Yeah, I think the biggest risk we all have, and business owners are in the same group, and that is what we don't know.
Yeah.
And what you don't know could end up destroying you. Right. So you have to bring in people that have a different perspective, different experience, that have sat in the seat and have experienced this firsthand and had to deal with it, rather than being 20 miles away and never dealt with these situations before, because it's not on their checklist.
Right.
Yeah, I would agree with that. As a younger man in business myself, I really was quite well prepared to go into business. I had worked in the industry for 4 years. I had two wonderful mentors, a father and a son. They taught me everything they knew about the business, and I tried to absorb it all. At the same time, I was in business school. I learned a whole lot about how to do things in business, and thought I was doing pretty well. Along came my CPA, who, in looking at a financial statement, said, "You know, your inventory is kind of high." And I said, "Well, based on what?" "My banker is pleased to see my inventory go up." And my CPA said, "Well, that's because they have more security for their loan. It doesn't have anything to do with your performance." She said, "So I was just doing a ratio analysis against some industry standards, and I discovered that your inventory is turning at 1.8 times. And I said, "Well, you know, this happened to be a shoe store. That seems to be about normal." She said, "Well, it might be normal, but it's not optimal. There are some who can get to 2.5 times. And in your case, do you realize that you could save, you know, $180,000 in investment in inventory if you turned your inventory faster?" And I thought, there's something that, with all of my preparation and the old salty dogs that taught me how to do business, they just kind of accepted it as a norm. I began looking around for a specialized company in inventory management and in planning, and I eventually went to work for them as a national consulting firm. You know, they literally provided the tools for me that helped me increase my inventory to a 2.7 times turnover. What that did is that increased the return on my inventory investment by 70%.
Wow.
Now, was that worthwhile? Well, of course it was worthwhile. And how was I able to do that? Because I looked for specialized help after having a specialized conversation about performance. So I think that it's nice to have people like that. And I wanted to speak specifically to what Ed had said about having a partner die. The best clients that I've worked for over the years, and that, you know, from most of my clients I work for from 12 up to 28 years, 29 years now, they all have a bunch of expert people who double along with their CPAs as trusted advisors. And I've been fortunate enough to do that with several companies. But I can tell you that if one of them died, they would be able, and they do under circumstances, and I've been there long enough to run into 3 or 4 black swan events, and they're able to handle it partially because they have outside people. They can call a very trusted insurance guy. They have a CPA who is also a fabulous management accountant and has helped put together management reports. They know just about everything you can imagine about the business in terms of reporting. They have, I work with them and I have a whole team. One of my company that works with them have a team that interfaces with their team to do a lot of projects. When something happens and they can't come to work, or they have, and this actually happened, one of the 2 partners had a brain tumor. And I can tell you that the group of 6 or 8 of us who have worked together carefully for years, we just picked up the wheelbarrow and kept on rolling. And we knew how to help them run that business, despite the fact that literally 50% of the brains were not active at that point. And it took, fortunately, he was okay. And it took him 6 or 8 weeks to get back, and he's back to normal and everything is fine. But I can tell you, it was quite dicey running a very complicated business in a certain mode where 2 of them had split the duties up. And we were able to pull together and make that thing happen. Same thing has happened in this COVID problem. It's like they have had all kinds of issues to deal with. And I can tell you, we've had lots and lots of Zoom meetings about how to deal with these issues together. Now, individually, our cost to them is not very, you know, it's a pretty good sized company. They have over 100 employees. Individually, our cost is really immaterial. Even together, we only cost about 1 executive.
Right.
Together.
Right.
And so what they get is they get 5 executive top level people on their team for the price of 1. That's how using specialists, you know, CPAs, attorneys, specialists, consultants that can work with you and know your business and be prepared to help you when you need it.
Ron, that was a great summary of what we're trying to get to. Hey, Ed, I'd like, you know, because I'd like to wrap this up. We've been at this almost an hour. Let's go back to the CPA example, and you've given so many valuable insights. You know, what would you, in line with what Ron just said, how would you recommend, you know, a company get access to these people when they have never done it before?
I think you look you look in the marketplace for a CPA who's got CFO experience. You look at their resume, you bring them in, and you talk to them, and you ask them to take a look at your business and give you some insights. And when you get that report, I think it'll really change your mind on the value that you're missing, the money you're leaving on the table because you don't know some very important aspects of running a business. I don't see how you can win. I think it's a win-win for everyone.
No, and I think if I understood you correctly, I mean, this is a strategy that a small business can use without having to really increase its expenses. It could bring in 2 or 3 different CPA firms and say, look, we want you to do a mini analysis of our business and come back with some recommendations before we make a hiring decision. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, the biggest challenge I have in this whole conversation is that you kind of are lumping CPAs together, and again, it's based upon the experience that they have. Just because you get 3 CPAs doesn't mean you're going to get 3 equal reports.
Well, and I guess what I was alluding to here is that given that one of the recommendations we made is have an analysis on an annual basis. You know, have somebody who's an expert in a given area, like Ron in marketing, and maybe me in terms
Absolutely.
and the CPA. And all I was saying, this is a strategy that somebody who's looking for new understanding and some of the wisdom that we've tried to share with them. That's one way of being able to screen them out or look at their capacity, is have them come and give you a report. I think it's fascinating that Ron said, you know, his CPA kind of pointed to an area that he wasn't even aware that was a problem, and made him realize that, yes, I could make some significant headway, and he was smart enough to listen.
And I might say it wasn't actually a problem. It was sort of industry norm,
Yeah,
but it was not efficient. It wasn't
yeah.
what I
There you
was
go.
capable
There you
of
go.
doing. And
Right.
so, you know, and it took a lot of time and effort, a brand new inventory system and automation and a whole bunch of effort to be able to make that change. I don't want to make it sound like it was easy. It was
No.
very difficult to do, but it made a huge impact on the business once we got that accomplished. And that's just a simple example. And there are numerous. We could sit here and talk for hours about examples of how noticing that, you know, one number could be a little bit better can really make a big impact on a business. And today, people need to be making as much impact as possible on their business while they can.
And the point I wanted to make here in terms of your example there and the ones that I had a chance to work with Ed on, the people that we've had the privilege of working with, and you're the example of that in this case, Ron, you know, listen, they weren't so close in on their ideas that they couldn't see another option and move that forward. And to your point is that it's not what something costs, it's what it pays. And you were willing to make the investment to transform, you know, the inventory system in your business, which yielded a 70% increase in your bottom line or whatever it was. That's,
Yeah.
you know, not everybody can do that. But the good news is that those kinds of services, that kind of wisdom is available to any small business if they get better at being able to look outside of their normal way of doing things and try to seek out people who might be able to give them the more valuable insights. And I think that's what we're going to, I think that's the point that we're trying to make here, is that today there are an enormous amount of us who are what I describe as North End baby boomers, who now would like to give back to a younger generation and try to make a difference, because it's such an important element of our economy, of our society, and of who we are. We are an entrepreneurial nation, and the more we can share that and collaborate, you know, the people who are willing to listen and do something will be a part of that next generation to make it happen. So, you know, I'm always grateful to be a part of this conversation. I learn as much as I can from you guys. So, unless there's something else, I think we can wrap up. Next week, we're going to be focusing on you, Ron. We're going to be talking about your diamond and how, you know, the listeners can learn from a value diamond, which will make their decisions easier when they begin to focus on the things that are really important instead of all the distractions that all of us have to deal with in business all the time.
Okay.
Ed, you want to anything you want to wrap up with here before we close?
No, I just wanted to echo what you said, and that is, and what Ron has said, is that you got to bring in people from the outside to give you a different perspective on how well things are running. And I think the report that they give you will tell you a lot, and you can determine from that point whether you want to continue any type of an ongoing relationship. But to me, investing $100 to make 1,000 It seems like a pretty good deal.
It does. Ron, anything you want to wrap up with?
Yeah, I'll just make a comment about business owners in general. And like you guys, I've worked with hundreds over the years, and dozens and dozens very, very intensively for a long period of time, but hundreds or maybe thousands in terms of data collection, evaluation, and that kind of thing in my position with a national consulting firm. And one of the things that I love about small business is how independent small business people are. It's what's left of the Western cowboy, what's left of the rugged individualist. It's really important that we maintain those kinds of people, because that's where the vast majority of innovation comes from, getting new and different things to market. And, you know, we could spend a whole show talking about just 2 or 3 of the people that we know off the top of our head that have created, you know, in the last 20 years in incredible wealth and products for Americans and the world. But that's where they come from. They come from this group. I thought I knew everything when I was in business. And it took me several years to figure out that no, there was still more to learn. One of the biggest issues with small business people is that they tend to think they know everything about this. And I had to be slapped in the face a little bit to realize that I knew a lot, but I still didn't know everything about it. And, you know, I had to learn some lessons very, very difficult and very, very costly just in terms of the money. You know, making mistakes that cost you money hurt just a little bit more. And so my point is, I recommend that people be open to some of these ideas about bringing in people from the outside, even if it's just for a limited time. Start having some of these relationships developed occasionally over the years in order to be able to get another perspective. Because the truth is, somebody who is paid, who knows the industry, who is in lots of other places that you can't be, is going to be the one who tells you the truth about the reality of what's going on out there. They may not be the smartest or the most expertise in everything they do, but they can give you true information about what everybody else is doing in a certain area. And that's really valuable. I don't think that the need for that kind of sort of institutional information or industrial information will ever go away, and you can't ever get too old to and learn a new trick. And
Right.
learn a new trick with trainers who happen to be called CPAs and attorneys, trusted advisors, consultants. Those are the people who do that for you.
Well, thank you, Ron. And Ed, thank you for all your input here. And for this is Ray Anderson again. We want to thank you for listening to the 3 Consulting Amigos. You know, our intention each week is to kind of give you some insights as to how you can do your business more effectively. And next week, we'll be looking at Ron's diamond. It's really a lot of fun. You'll enjoy it and you'll get a lot out of it. So thank you again, gentlemen. We'll see you next week. Same time, same station.
See ya.